So today on this episode, I have Mark Irwin, and he was an absolute joy to sit down with. Honestly, I find sitting down, nothing against all the younger songwriters in town, but I always have such a good time with people who have been here a little bit longer because they have just so much wisdom in this community and have been able to see the changes that Nashville and the entire industry has gone through. So actually sitting down with them is very educational even for me. And I'm able to kind of bounce my thoughts off of them and see, if I'm even leaning in the right direction of what I'm thinking. And that's why I love it so much. I think coming from a guy like Mark, who's had really a lot of success with Blake Shelton, Tim McGraw, Alan Jackson, Tyler Farr, he has had a lot of success in music. And then when, I asked him if there's a moment he could relive, and it's a moment with his mom. His mom has passed now, and the fact that he has all of these things he could say he could relive, all of this monetary success and things that he could do. And what says a lot about him is that he wants to relive a moment and with his mom where he said he wish he would have focused more on living in the moment with her, which if that doesn't say all about somebody, I don't really know what does. I think we agree on a lot when it comes to the idea of the state of the music and wanting to hear more traditional country music. And I know he was just recently signed to Smack Publishing, and I find that very telling of our genre and in this industry, that I believe it's not just going to be Smack. You're going to see other people fall in line with working with writers like Mark, who had maybe more success in the 90s and in the 2000s, because that is where technically country music is kind of shifting to a more modernized version of that. I really do believe, I live in the comment sections of a lot of places, and I see what the people want. I see why they are falling in love with Lainey Wilson and other artists that feel a lot more like traditional country. And we get on the topic of, again, I once talked already with Parker Welling about this, about Fast Car and Luke Combs, and how he was all for that until, potentially, it won Song of the Year. And he thought, well, hold on a minute. This song's already, won that, or probably maybe already has, and it's been done. And that has been my concern from day one, and why I want to sit down with people like Mark to discuss these things so that our industry can actually come more together and figure out why it potentially could be collapsing and how we fix it. And I loved his outlook on everything. I think that he has a great point. A thing about Mark that I thought was so refreshing is his positive attitude. And I also felt like that was real as well. I think there are people who can sit across from me and say, just be positive and it'll all work out. And you could feel that it's just a bunch of BS. He actually made me feel like he really is positive and grateful to be here, and that he really could not imagine doing anything else. Those are the people that I want writing our music, are people who are grateful to be here and are positive about being here and just believe in working really hard. Like he talks about how when he came here, he worked at the Bluebird Cafe as a bar back and then became a bartender and doing everything he needed to do to make it. Now, granted, very different then versus now, and how I think the path is quite different into getting seen. And we talked about how it has become a bit cliquey, and finding your people, your camp, is a lot harder. And I think now in the modern way, it's about showing up to these writers' rounds, shaking hands with people, really getting out there and meeting people and asking, let's write. And that is a way that I think is kind of more of the modern way of doing it. And I'm just very happy to hear Mark's take on country music, and I believe the hope of where it's going. I think we should all be very hopeful that this isn't the end of a lot of things, because again, like I said, I live in the comment section. I see what people say, and I really do believe there's a lot of hope with songwriters like Mark, who are there now to almost help the new songwriters really be able to craft what we all miss about country music. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Mark Irwin, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you.
Thank you.
And I know, we know some similar people in town, which is even more fun. And we'll get to talking about Cam in a bit because I just adore him to pieces. But before we really get started about the immense amount of success you've had as a songwriter, I kind of want to just ask, if you could relive one moment since you've moved to Nashville, a memory that you could replay over and over in your head and you could relive it again, what would it be?
The first year Here in the Real World was nominated for the CMA Song of the Year, that first CMA Awards, because it was nominated twice, 2 years in a row. And the first year, my mom was still with us, and she came down from up north. And I had a girlfriend at the time as well. And I was so worried about, I wanted to show my mom a good time, but I also wanted to include my girlfriend. And I was so worried about her. I don't think I gave my mom the night she deserved that night. And I mean, we had a good time and all, but I just wish we could do it again and could have been more focused on her.
Yeah, I guess you living in the moment, you never know when those moments are going to pass.
Yeah.
What was your mom's favorite part of that night? Do you know?
Getting to meet the Judds.
She
loved the Judds, and she got to meet she only met Winona. She didn't meet the mom, Naomi, but and she thought she was just walking on air.
That's really, really cool. What was your favorite part of that night? Was watching your mom?
You know what? I was sitting right behind Vince Gill at the time, besides, getting to do it with my mom. But when he won for When I Call Your Name, and he got up, and before he went up to accept the award, he turned around and gave me a big old hug, and that was big. That was huge for me.
You hear a lot of good things about Vince Gill as well.
Great guy.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you were raised in the Bronx,
yes,
right?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so what about, I mean, again, I'm from California, so I totally disregard the idea of genre, location, genre. But what is it that made you have an attachment towards traditional country songs?
The guitar mostly. When I started taking guitar lessons, I just really fell in love with the guitar and guitar players. And as I was learning the guitar a little bit, the music of the time, this was like mid-'70s, it was getting a little bit away from guitar, rootsy music, and more the new wave and a lot of more progressive rock stuff. And it was synthesizers and keyboards and all that. And it just wasn't appealing to me all that much. And from a Linda Ronstadt album, I was reading the liner notes. Remember liner notes? I saw the name Emmylou Harris singing harmony on a lot of stuff. So I went out and bought an Emmylou Harris album.
Okay.
Loved it. I saw Merle Haggard wrote a couple of things and others. I went out and bought a Merle Haggard record. And once I heard him doing Tonight the Bottle Let Me Down, I heard that steel guitar and Roy Nichols playing some guitar stuff, I was in. And so first it was the guitar playing, and then soon after I discovered the songwriting.
Okay.
By people like Merle Haggard and Hank Williams and some of the others,
Were you kind of odd man out? Where you were raised, or did you have like a group of people?
I guess so. I had one friend up north who felt the same way. So, we also, I should backstep a little. We also listened to the Grateful Dead a lot too.
Well-rounded.
Yeah, and they were, they did some country stuff. So we got it from that side as well. But so I had one friend, and we'd hang out every night, just play guitars and stuff. So I didn't feel like I was an outcast too much. But once I started writing, I would go to open mics down in Greenwich Village, because there were a lot of places that had open mics.
Yeah.
A place called Kenny's Castaways, a place called The Back Fence. And they were telling me, I thought I was just writing cool stuff, and they told me, you should go to Nashville. You're writing country songs. I go, really? I am? Okay.
What age was that?
Probably late teens.
Wow.
18, 19, maybe 20.
Did you know anybody here?
No. I graduated college. I had some money saved up, maybe $1,500. I had my little Ford Escort, and I always figured I was going to come back, and I just came down here. And then my second or third day in town, I got a job at the Bluebird Cafe, and everybody's been so great to me ever since. I never looked back.
I mean, I completely understand. Yeah, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
What's one song that you didn't write that completely changed your life?
Before I moved down here, or after?
Before.
Well, I was such a big fan of great songwriters like Bob Dylan, Jackson Brown, Bruce Springsteen. So it's hard to narrow it down to one song, but Bob Dylan's Blood on the Tracks album, I don't know if you know the album, it's just, to me, it was like the high point. And, that's what really sealed the deal. Like, I want to do that. I want to write great songs, because that album just really moved me and, affected me. And albums like Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, Jackson Brown's Late for the Sky. So a lot of that stuff. And from there was Ricky Skaggs, his Highways and Heartaches album had some great songwriting on that too that I just fell in love with.
What's a song today that you're in love with?
Well, the dance is always like, the song I aspire to. There's a song called, do you remember there's a Tim McGraw song called Just to See You Smile that was written by Mark Nessler? I feel like I'm always trying to write a melody as good as that.
Yeah, the dance is someone asked me that, I think I just did an interview where someone asked me like the top greatest country songs, like in my opinion, and I put down the dance because it's
definitely up there. And I've been lucky to do a few. I've known Tony, the writer, for years, and we've just in the last year or two have started doing shows together. And I don't care how many hits I have to play. Sitting on stage with him when he does the dance is surreal. It's just like, wow, I can't believe I'm sitting here.
I think that's what's really cool about Nashville, though, is when people come to town and they don't realize who's written a song, and they sit down and they listen to people play. Because I even know when I brought my parents here for the first time, they were like, wait. And I was like, but to me, that's really hence why I even started this podcast, was the idea that songwriters don't exactly get a ton of recognition publicly. And that always bugged me, because it's not that artists aren't writing their own music at times, but I just had Pete Good on, and I know that you guys are both at SMAC, and I had brought up the idea of if songwriters just went away and it was just left up to artists and the labels to get music released, what would this industry look like? And
I have to chuckle.
Exactly. Well, we both had.
There are some artists who are great songwriters.
Of course.
When he was still healthy, and I think Randy Travis was a great songwriter. But you're right, and it's kind of always been that way, even before country and like the Tin Pan Alley days. Nobody knew who wrote them. Everybody thought Frank Sinatra wrote all his own songs, and Linda Ronstadt wrote all her songs. I think since the pandemic. Like things like songwriter shows, corporate shows, like us songwriters are getting to play out in a lot of situations where we didn't have in the past. And I think more and more folks are getting interested in the songwriting and the songwriters who wrote these hits that they've heard on the radio.
Well, I agree. And even coming from like me being an artist in town, I think what's so different from, say, years past where people just didn't know and they didn't assume, nor did they maybe even care too much. It was just how the artist delivered that song. What I've noticed as an artist is over the last few years, it's if you're not writing your own songs, you're kind of looked at as less of an artist. Like people are less interested, which I found very bizarre to me, because a lot of artists kind of need songwriters in the room to help.
You found that in the country genre too?
Craft that and we need. I think it takes a village to help craft something incredible. And I think this is what's caused a lot of artists now to feel and I'm speaking even for myself, like the need to have to say my name's on it. Because if my name's not
Validate
on it, that's a problem. And I wish it wasn't like that, because I don't believe in that. I believe the best song wins regardless of who wrote it. My name doesn't have to be on it. For years, for the first 6 years of me living here, I didn't write anything. And because I just thought, if these are incredible people, this is what they do. This is a God-given talent.
Well, I think it's a great talent to be able to interpret a song, whether you wrote it or not. Again, I mentioned Frank Sinatra, Linda Ronstadt. They never wrote a song in their lives, but they made each song they performed like it was their own.
Exactly.
And there are others who I'm not, thinking of right
course.
now, but yeah.
So I want to talk about some of the hits that you've written.
Okey-dokey.
And I know your first number one with Alan Jackson, Here in the Real World. What can you just take me through? How did that come to be? Because I know, did you meet at the Bluebird Cafe when you were bartending?
No, I tell a funny story when I performed that we met at the Bluebird and we wrote this song, but it didn't happen that way. I was working at the Bluebird, but I was also turning in songs on a somewhat daily basis to a company called 1010 Publishing.
Okay.
And they were a publishing company, and they were also managing artists, and Barry Coburn was managing Alan. And they were liking some of the stuff I was bringing. And then one day Barry just, thought maybe we should get together. Alan didn't have a record deal or anything at the time.
Wow.
And so we went out to dinner the night before. We all met. We had a few drinks. And the next day we got together, a little bit hungover. And we were trading ideas. And it took about 2 hours. But once Alan, he just threw out these first two lines of the song, Cowboys Don't Cry, Heroes Don't Die. And for some reason it just clicked. The whole idea of movies, blah, blah, blah. And the song dropped out in about half hour, 45 minutes.
Wow.
But it was due to Jewel and Barry Coburn at 1010 Music that put us together.
Okay. And
and introduced us.
And you said he wasn't signed yet.
Not as an artist. No, I think he was writing. Actually, he was writing for a company that Glenn Campbell owned.
Wow.
At the time, yeah.
Did you feel like once the song was done, it was a hit? You knew it.
I thought it was really great. I have a friend in town, another great songwriter. Her name is Liz Hengber, and she was also a waitress at the Bluebird, and we were pals. And I think it was either that day or maybe the next day, I played her the work tape. We were in my car. I played her the work tape for Here in the Real World, and she played me the work tape for a song she had just written, which became For My Broken Heart, which was a big, what's her name? Oh, I'm having a, oh God, the red-haired Reba.
Oh yeah, that one.
Brain freeze. It was a big hit. Sorry, it was a big hit for Reba, and that was a good day. We played each other these work tapes the same day. Both songs became huge hits. But before Alan recorded Here in the Real World, an artist named Tony Perez, he was signed to Warner Brothers. He recorded it, but it never came out.
Oh, it never came out.
Thankfully.
Well, it's true.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
No,
version?
I never even heard it. And I don't know what happened. I don't know why they dropped him, and what happened. And then I guess maybe my timeline was wrong. It felt like it was about 6 months later, Alan finally got signed to Arista. He cut his album and he turned it in. And Tim Dubois loved what he had, but he still thought it needed something. He didn't know what. And he asked Alan to play him everything. So he played him our demo of Real World. And, he heard that. He goes, you have to record this.
Wow.
Alan, from what I remember, he thought the song was too rangy for him to sing.
Okay.
When the chorus goes, here, he thought that was, and it took him a little work in the studio, I think, but they finally nailed it. And
hey, that happens. It only makes you better.
So I have to thank Tim Dubois and Shelby Kennedy. He was at ASCAP, and he kind of turned Tim on to either Alan or the song. I can't remember exactly, but I know he was involved.
When did it technically become a number one? In 1990?
Yes.
Okay.
It came out in 89.
Born.
All right. It's amazing how like an 8-year-old could have a number one. No, I'm just kidding. It came out in 89. I think it went number one in 90.
So I've discussed on this podcast before and with friends and people in general in this industry about how drastically different it is to have had a number one in 1990 versus a number one today. Mm-hmm. And I even mean monetarily wise, between what it means for someone's career as a songwriter and as an artist. Are you grateful that you had a lot of success in number ones before the industry has drastically changed?
Back then, I think there were more artists then on the radio than there are now. Mm-hmm. So the song, so you're talking about monetarily, the song, even though it went number one, it probably got less spins on the radio, which means less money from your PRO, whether ASCAP or BMI. And now with less artists, the songs that are going up the charts get played more. So I think a number one in 2024 makes a little bit more money than a number one did in 1990.
Oh, you think it makes more money now?
For performances. I don't know, but not, sales, obviously not. Mm-hmm. But I think for radio and other performances, I think so.
Because what is interesting to me is the distribution of music and the access to music is bigger and wider than ever before, right? I mean, you can hear a song, you have the ability to listen to any song at any time right now. Mm-hmm. And back in 1990 or even 20 years ago, you would have to wait for a song to be played on the radio, or you'd have to go and buy a digital album. Right. But what I don't understand is because the access to music is so much greater and people are hearing songs much more than they once were, I think it's interesting that I think artists and songwriters are struggling more so than ever before.
Well, because there's so many more options than just radio now, and just the legislation on how we get paid hasn't caught up with the technology yet of streaming and other options to listen to music. And thankfully, organizations like the Nashville Songwriters Association, they're fighting for it and they're trying to make it happen. And I think it's going to improve little by little. My generation probably won't reap the benefits of that, but hopefully the next generation of songwriters coming up will, and they'll figure out a way to make it a fair and lucrative career.
So did you find it to be a bit more enjoyable back in the 90s and in the early 2000s?
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun. It just seemed like a lot more, I hate to use the word family, but Music Row and the music business, back then, you know what the CMA Fest is nowadays. It's a big in June. Back then it was called Fanfare. Mm-hmm. And if you were in the business, if you were a songwriter or worked for a publisher or a record label, you were invited into this big backstage tent, and you were there for 3 days and saw everybody play and met everybody. And it was a big party for the family of the music business. And now, you know, it's just a concert and, you know, for the fans. And I don't think people want to spend, you know, industry-wise, I don't think they want to spend the money to make it that family vibe that it used to be.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get into the idea of feeling like, at least for me more so than ever, the stories I've heard of the past Nashville and the industry versus today, feels a bit more cliquey today than it did then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's harder to just, you know, pack up your bags and move here and find your clique, right?
Well,
find
even
your people.
artists are coming to town and they're coming to town with friends or bringing friends in. So they're writing, you know, with the friends that they brought with them. You know, if like an artist so-and-so from Georgia gets signed to a label and he has a publishing deal, his buddies who he's been writing with, whether they're great writers or not, they'll get a publishing deal because they're writing with the artist, you know, and they kind of keep it all like in-house a little bit like that.
We
you
do.
know, that's the one thing since the 90s and the early 2000s. I think artists and management companies realized how much money there was to be made in songwriting. So they, you know, decided to cash in on that as well.
Oh, but that's just so hard for the actual songwriter themselves. Yeah. But which is like, I've talked about it with numerous guests of, you kind of need you know, and that's what has always upset me even before I even started writing, because really that's the least thing on my resume as a songwriter. I consider myself a co-writer, not a songwriter, because I'm still pretty new at it. Sure. But it has always upset me because it's like without people who are, you know, songwriters, you don't have anything for the artist to do. You don't have anything for the label to push. You don't have anything. Right. So at the end of the day, it's the music that brings people together, and now it's feeling very divided.
And it's working and everybody's doing okay, but you wonder how many iconic songs are being, you know, released. Like when was the last time another song that had the kind of impact like The Dance?
I am so glad you brought that up. I talk about this quite often, about the idea of creating music that will last and that you're going to hear. I forgot who I talked about this with, but you have so many number ones on the radio, and they're typically one a week. And back when you used to remember them, and now you kind of feel.
Well, it was more common also to have multi-week number ones too, songs that stayed number one for 3, 4, 5 weeks at a time. And these days it might happen, but it's a lot more rare.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about your job at the Bluebird, because I think that is really cool. I just talked to a guest, Parker Welling, where her parents, when they were married at the time, they actually met at the Bluebird.
Really?
So it is really fun to hear
awesome.
Stories about the Bluebird and how iconic it is in some people's journeys here in Nashville. So how did you get that job, and what is your best story from working there?
I don't know if I can tell you the story.
Oh, come on.
No, when I got to town, NSAI was an organization then. It's not the organization it is now, but somebody there, I went there. That's the one name I had. You should go to Nashville Songwriters Association. And I did, and the person there, his name was Richard Helm. I can't believe I remember that name. He said, "Yeah, you should go to the Bluebird tonight. Fred Knobloch, who's a great songwriter, is playing." So I went, and Fred was amazing. And I started talking to this lady sitting next to me. Turned out she was the manager, and they needed somebody, a bar back, you know, because back then they were still open for lunch.
Oh,
so
wow.
They would serve lunch at night. They would serve lunch, and after the lunch rush was over, they locked the doors, I guess at 2 or 3 o'clock. We moved the tables, brought the sound system out and set it up. And then we were ready for the night. And then at the end of the show at night, we tear the sound system down, set the tables back up for lunch. So they needed somebody like, you know, bussing tables and cleaning dishes and that stuff. And so I got hired to do that. And after doing that for a couple of years, I got promoted to bartending.
Wow.
So, I mean, but okay, this is an early story. My favorite story is I think the first week I was there, I met 2 of my idols. I met Don Schlitz. He's a great songwriter. I don't know if you know Don. He's a country music Hall of Fame songwriter. He wrote The Gambler and so many other, you know, amazing songs. And he was just there warming up in the hallway, and I didn't know who he was at the time. I go, "You gonna play tonight?" You know, he was so sweet and nice to me. And completely like unaffected by all of it. And then he gets up there and, plays all these amazing songs in The Gambler, and we became friends ever since. And so I really relished that, that meeting there at the Bluebird. And also the first week I was there, just out of nowhere, John Prine came in and he ended up doing an impromptu 30-minute set. And I had a friend back home in New Jersey who's a big John Prine fan. So I went behind the bar. I still wasn't working the bar, but I had access.
Yeah.
And I called him on the bar on the Bluebird's phone, and I held it up and let him listen to the whole set, probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And when it was over, I think the next month, I guess she got the bill because the next month there was a lock on the phone where we couldn't make any outgoing calls. They could just get an outgoing call. So I think, maybe that was my fault.
You caused that.
But getting to see and meet John Prine, my first week there, and we kind of became buddies. Not close, but close enough where it was an honor for me, just the fact that he knew my name.
Well, I mean, it's really fun to think that like in Nashville, when you live here and you are involved in the community, you can become friends with your heroes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is really, that's what I find to be like I feel the most blessed by being here and doing this is like, of course I would love to have success in this business and all those other things. But the fact that I have been able to shake hands, sit down across the seat and actually have conversations with people that I never in my wildest dreams
100%.
I would ever be able to talk to.
Yeah.
So that part I think is really cool, and that's amazing.
But it's funny, because like I still get tongue-tied when I meet some of these folks, and people I respect and admire so much, and I still feel like I did like the first week I got to town.
That's how I feel like if I were to ever meet Keith Urban, I still am like want that day to come, but at the same time, I kind of think I'll get.
I was lucky, I got when I was after Real World, I was working with 1010 pretty exclusively, and they were working with Keith back then too, because they were Australian, and they knew Keith, and they were working with him somewhat. And so I knew him then when he was doing the ranch, and it didn't really take off yet. And then the interim time, and then after he hit it, I hadn't seen him in 10 years, and he played guitar on, Highway Don't Care. So I got to see him at the #1 party, and we picked up conversation like it was like, the next day. He remembered my girlfriend's name at the time, much to my wife's chagrin, because she wasn't there anymore, and stuff like that. He's a sweet, in long story short, he's as sweet as you think he is. He's great guy.
One day. When it comes to songwriting, what do you find the most challenging?
New ways to say the same thing, we're, really, something that hasn't been said before, or saying something that's been said a million times in a new way.
Okay.
We're all looking for new rhymes for love.
That's right. You know what? No, that's really true. Do you ever find it hard with conflicting ideas in the room?
Sure. That's part of collaborating. And, most of the time, I don't, my 30 years here, I've never had one extremely bad writing appointment. There's been a couple, few obviously where we didn't hit it, who we didn't, maybe we didn't even write a song because we couldn't settle on anything. But I've never anything that got to the point where it was, unpleasant.
Yeah.
Some people just have different ideas about things. And I think when you have an idea for a song and you bring it into a room that you could be co-writing with, hopefully you trust your co-writers enough to know, hey, they might see this from a different angle than I see it, but let's give them some rope and see what happens with it. And then 9 out of 10 times, it's usually better than my original thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got to be a good teammate in the.
Yeah. And it's a talent, because before you move here, I'm sure 99% of writers who came here were writing by themselves. So learning to collaborate, to co-write, that's a whole nother, muscle that you're using all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it takes time, to learn how to do it well.
So you said you've been here for 30 years.
Well, I got here 87, so more than 30 years, right? Yeah.
So in that amount of time, when do you feel like was the biggest moment that you've been let down?
Ooh. I don't know, the whole career has been ups and downs so much, I've been so lucky, when things don't work out, I just like, okay, we'll write another song tomorrow. Really, that's always been my attitude. I've always tried to stay positive about it. I know, I have a lot of friends from back home who, I don't want to say they're miserable, but they're probably pursuing, a lot of them are retired now, but when they were working, they were pursuing things that weren't fulfilling. It was just, to make a living, and they probably other things they wanted to do with their lives. So for whatever reason, I had the fortune or whatever, my folks instilled something in me where I was going to chase what I wanted to chase, and I wanted to do music and writing. So I came down here. So, my biggest one, I had a song, the Dixie Chicks recorded a song. I wrote it with Mike Henderson. We were just talking about Mike Henderson, and they recorded it on the Fly album, which went to, sold 9-10 million
Wasn't
copies.
too bad.
And but I couldn't feel bad about it because at the time there was an artist named, I can't think of his name. Anyway, there was an artist, and they did it like as a duet, and then he got sick, so he couldn't finish it. So the track was done, but his vocal wasn't done, so it didn't make the album. But I knew guys in their band; they were already rehearsing the song for live performances and everything, but it just didn't make the album. It's on YouTube; you can find it.
I was about to say,
it's called Wherever You Are, and it's on YouTube. It's probably had over 2 or 3 million plays on YouTube at this point.
And who's singing it on that?
The Dixie Chicks.
The Dixie Chicks.
It's the recording. Daryl Dodd, I'm sorry, he was the artist. He was a great artist back then, a great guitar player, great singer, and unfortunately for him, he got sick with something that that affected his singing and playing. And he's doing well now in Texas, and he's a big honky tonk guy in Texas and doing great. But yeah, so at the time, and some people say, well, maybe they should get somebody else to sing on it. And I was always, as much as I would have loved to have that song on that album, I always respected. The guy's name was Blake Chancey. He was producing it, him and Paul Worley. I always respected their decision not to put somebody else on it because it was Daryl's thing. We're not just going to replace him because he can't do it. And,
well, that's really nice because, at the end of the day, this is, I guess, technically called the music business. And so it's nice when you meet people who have reactions like that.
Well, I'm telling you something. It's the music business, but my career and the people who've affected me, I have a lot of people who are loyal, real champions to me, who are still behind me to this day, even when their careers have exceeded mine in some ways. I have a lot of people, that have been great to me, loyal. They never turned their back on me, even on the slow years or whatever.
I love to hear that.
Yeah,
and
I've been really fortunate.
This is why, this is my opinion, but this is why I wish I was in this business and I was older and I was doing it when you were doing it, like then starting. Well, just a bit now, because I don't feel that camaraderie the same way that you speak about it.
Right.
And that to me is very disheartening because I was obviously raised that like everyone can bloom, right?
Yeah.
And you help water each other's plants and everyone can bloom. And I don't feel that anymore here, but that's just my opinion, right?
It's gotten a lot more like I'd say the movie and acting business. I remember when somebody was comparing it back in the day, and they were saying, well, yeah, in the movie business, if somebody's auditioning for a role, there's a role available, they don't tell anybody else about it. They want the less people to audition, the more. But here, it's like when somebody was looking for a song, we told everybody. Everybody knew, hey, man, if it's not my song, I hope it's yours.
Wow.
I learned.
I know that still exists. Yeah. It's not like it doesn't.
And
still...
I've learned you got to cheer when anybody hits a home run, even if it's not on the team you like.
Like that, Mark.
Yeah.
And by the way, congratulations on signing with Smack.
Thank you.
Recently. That's really, really amazing because I always consider them part of almost like Nashville's Cool Kids Club.
100%.
They are definitely one of the cliques that are the Cool Kids Club.
100%.
So how did all of that come? Did they come to you? Did you go to them? How did that signing happen?
It's a funny story. My last company, I was at a company that kind of imploded. It was a small company, and for whatever reason, the owner decided to shut it down, not in the best of ways. And after a couple of months of getting over the shock of that, because we were doing really well, I was trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do next? I didn't just want to get another publishing deal, another place. There's not that many places I felt comfortable in or at home because, things have changed in this town a little bit. Mm-hmm. But Robin Palmer at Smack, she, the big dog there, her and Shane McAnally, I worked with her at EMI years ago, another publishing company, and I worked with her at another one called Anchor Down over the years. So we've remained great friends. She's always been a great champion of mine. And I wasn't going to ask to sign with Smack because I knew they were probably crowded. They didn't want to. They had a few veteran writers. Mm-hmm. That's a nice way of saying older. No. And I didn't think they were looking for it. I don't know if I had anything to offer them, or I didn't know what to think. But I asked Robin to go out for breakfast. Just maybe she had some ideas, maybe to talk it out. Maybe I was done. I don't know. But as we talked and as, we enjoyed each other's company and reminisced a little bit, told her about some stuff I was doing now. She heard some newer songs recently. She's like, well, why don't you just come in and let's have a meeting with the creative staff? And so it happened kind of organically like that. And I got along great with everybody. It's just an amazing staff there, from, the other pluggers to the folks who work in the office and even the roster of writers. It's just an amazing group of people.
Yeah.
So it just kind of happened real naturally, organically, again, to use that word. So now I'm really proud that this is like the third time I get to work with Robin, who I think is one of the best publishers ever work on Music Row. And the other pluggers there too, Lee Crable and Carly, I can't remember, Carly Slater, and the others, Jeremy and Sam. They're just great folks. And yeah, I couldn't ask for a better situation.
So there's a shift in sound in country music right now. It's starting to lean more back to traditional, I guess, quote unquote, country music. And I will say the average consumer is rejecting now that modern.
Well, there's a little of both, I think. There's still some of the other stuff. There's some new.
Oh, absolutely.
There's some new, like Jelly Roll, and what's the guy? There's a new artist named Dasha, which I don't really know too much about.
Yeah.
So but you're right. There are a number of.
Like, I'm listening to people, right? And I'm reading comments, and I'm watching it really heavily. And so me bringing this back to Smack is, I think for a good chunk of time, I would say probably a decade, we were really embracing a lot of more modern sound in the country music, kind of like a melting pot of genres. Now you see a lot of middle America, who is our biggest consumer, I think, that is starting to reject that sound. And this is why we're leaning into people like Lainey Wilson. And that is really big. So I'm watching Smack, so sign you. And I think you are someone who is very good at writing a traditional country song.
That is definitely my forte.
So I'm seeing the shift in that. I'm seeing how you were just recently signed to Smack. I happen to know that the music industry is a lot like the fashion industry. They're about 5 steps ahead,
right? Kind
of looking into seeing what's coming next. Because you are being signed like the Cool Kids Club at Smack, who's used to, I think, writing a lot of modern country that's been happening in the last 10 years. Where do you think country music is going? And are there going to be songwriters more like yourself who technically had a hit starting in the 90s and moving on that are going to starting to be far more utilized again because you do it best?
Well, thanks. Thank you for saying that. And I do see a lot of up and comers wanting to write, coming to town. I have a group of friends. They're young. I met this one kid. His name is Davis Luce. I met him in St. Augustine, and he just lives and breathes traditional country music. And once he graduated school, he came up here, and they just want to do real country. They don't care about right now. I mean, they're in their 20s, whatever. They don't care about streaming, how they're paying in royalties and all that stuff. They just want to write and play great country music, and they just love it. There's a whole slew of young writers that I've, and artists that I've met who are just all about traditional country. So, and they're writing with folks like me. They're writing with folks like Mark Beeson, who's a songwriter at Smack as well. He's an older, sorry, Mark.
I don't mean, and I'm sorry, when I say older, I mean
veteran writer.
Yeah.
I call myself an elder statesman. But, somebody who has some experience that can call that up and maybe has something to teach them, because we've been doing it so long, and maybe find a shortcut to something that's going to take them 2 or 3 years to learn or whatever. So, a couple of years ago, like I heard on pitch sheets and publishers saying that these artists are looking for like songs more like 90s country. And to me, I was thinking, they don't want the sound of 90s country. They just want good songs. Like there's some great songs in quote unquote 90s country. And I think they thought either they were tired of performing lightweight stuff that they didn't feel that connected to. I think people want to start singing great songs, and I think the audience wants to hear great songs that they can connect to. So, but I think there's always going to be people doing, different, combinations of stuff,
of course,
going on. But I think you're going to hear, with artists like Lainey, like you said, and Zach Top, and a couple of others are coming up. I mean, it's going to be a lot more country music blossoming as well.
Yeah. Would you say that when you're in the writing room now and you kind of hear chatter amongst the community in general that people are more proactive in the writing room in writing more traditional music versus kind of what has been popular over the last decade?
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing more and more. First off, I'm writing more and more, and this was by my choice, and I'm really feeling like I'm writing my better stuff. a lot more two ways. For a while there, it was, you'd sit down, you'd have a writer,
Oh gosh,
a
yes.
track person,
Yes.
and an artist, in every room. But now I'm feeling I'm just writing more two ways with great songwriters or, up and coming artists. And like I just turned in a song today that I wrote with this young artist. Her name is Aniston Pate, and she is country as corn. And you should hear the demo, man. It's got chicken picking, guitars on it. Stuff sounds like it could have been on the radio in the 90s. And Smack's reaction so far has been amazingly positive about it. They love it. They love her. So who knows, but I'm just seeing a lot more of it. And I'm seeing people not afraid to write a country song like they might have been
They might have
a couple
been
years ago.
Well, and I was on the phone with a good friend of mine, and I said it kind of feels like we're going back to the basics of God, love, and country, right? Like, I think we've shifted away from it for whatever reason. I think whether people were scared to talk about certain things or speak, their truth or be a real storyteller of things. And I think, again, there is such a high level of need and want from the consumer, and I see it so wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
And they're begging for it.
Absolutely.
And at some point, there's so much noise you have to listen. And you kind of have to put aside an agenda of any kind. You have to say, I have to do what the audience is wanting to do. And that's what I appreciated so much of the earlier country, the 90s and the early millennium, is that those were true storytellers. And we are missing that. And I'm glad that it sounds like the pendulum may be swinging back.
I think so. I mean, I don't think it's any, I don't think it's hard to understand why somebody like Lainey all of a sudden is just taking off the way she has. She's a real artist, much in the same, I'm not comparing her, but much in the way like a Dolly Parton is an artist. She just
Speaking to the people.
Yeah, connects to the audience, and the songs reflect who she is, and it's all real. It feels very real. I also, to your point, I also think the pandemic played into it too. I think a lot of people who music means something to, I think they discovered they went down a lot of rabbit holes and discovered a lot of music because they had so much time on their hands on the internet, stuff that they might not have been exposed to.
Okay.
And then after the pandemic, it seems like the live music industry has really just, taken off in such a ways that you can sell out, great rooms and not have a big hit on the radio just because you have enough of a following online. There's other country artists like, I can't think of it, but people like even Jason Isbell and other country artists who don't have any music on the radio and they're still selling out, halls and stuff like that.
Well, and I know we were discussing before we started, and I think even a little, is that I have a friend, Cam Newby, who well, and you write with, and I think he's an up and coming writer, and
100%.
That is incredible. And what do you think we should expect from newer songwriters, and what should they focus on to kind of help the shift that's happening in country music?
Well, just keep writing, and just trying to make quality music because eventually it's going to work. We were saying before about Cam. I think Cam writes such great songs. He hasn't had that big hit yet, but I think once he does and people start listening to him with a little bit of a different ear, the floodgates are going to open. I know a couple of other writers I feel the same way about. There's a guy named Adam Wood who's been here for a while now, and everybody knows how good he is just because of circumstances. Like he's had cuts and the album, for whatever reason, things fell apart, whatever. He hasn't had that big one yet, but once he does, he's going to be huge.
Yeah.
I think once you have some success, people start listening to you a little bit differently. So I think that's going to happen, more and more for people like Cam and Adam and other folks.
Yeah. So I notice, obviously, and a lot of people know that songwriters do a lot of writers' rounds, or they go on tour and they sing the songs that maybe were their hits or new songs that they've written. Do you think that songwriters go on the road? Now, this could be a mixed bag of a combination of it, but do you think it's mainly for the love of performing, getting their new songs heard, or to make money?
All three.
Three.
Well, maybe not to get the new songs heard as much, to make up for a lack of sales and other ways that we might have been making a living on doing our music back in the day. All of a sudden now, corporate writer shows and other kind of places like that are offering us a new stream of income, and I think most writers who started out playing guitar were always, wanted to be performers in their own way, So I think, it's a combination of it. I love performing and it's again, it's a great new stream of income for me. And plus, I've always had the itch, I mean, I just released a CD after 30 years of wanting to do it. I call it 30 years of false starts and laziness. I finally released it, and for me, it was
congratulations.
Thanks. And I'm not expecting to be a big artist. I'm expecting it was just like scratching a creative itch that I always wanted to do, and I finally, I
actually hear that from a lot of people I sit down with, where there's no intention of being an artist, but it's like their own passion project that they want to do and they want to release.
But it does help get some more gigs and stuff too, so that all kind of plays into each other. But I just think we were talking about it before. I think people are interested in hearing the stories behind the songs of the songs that they love, and they're being exposed to it now in a way that they weren't, back in the day.
Where would you say you get the most reaction, like location-wise, where you perform? Like, what venue do you love performing the most?
Well, in Nashville, the listening room is just a great room, and the Bluebird's always, the mecca. They say, for the performer, it's the Ryman, and for the songwriter, it's the Bluebird, and I get that a little bit. But the listening room has really come up as a premier songwriters club that, and they are so good to songwriters, giving them a place to play. And It's a bigger room, so you're playing to more people. Excuse me. You're going home with a little bit more pay, but, it's just a great night. And, it sells out.
It does. It's always, and it's a new audience every night, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So when people say, like, I talk to people who have no idea about the music industry, right? So, and I talk to them about how artists or songwriters will get in a room and they'll write a song, sit very much the way you have, and you'll say, hey, we should get this in the hands of so-and-so. I want Blake Shelton to hear this. I want Kenny Chesney to hear this. How easy or hard is it to get a song you've written in the hands you want it to hear?
Well, again, it depends where you are. I write with some folks who have been, I've been, no complaints on my career. I've been lucky, blessed, successful, but I don't have the access to certain artists that a couple of my other friends who have, even more successes might, I do have a couple of artists I could send a song right to, but not a lot of them. But I have a couple of friends, like one of my best friends and dearest, co-writers and dearest friends in the world. His name is, Josh Keir. He's written, amazing songs. He could probably send a song to anybody. Anybody's open to listening to one of his songs. Me, I might have to take another route to get there, but hopefully that's what you're working with a publisher.
I was about to say, is that where Smack comes into play?
Yeah, that's the deal. In the most basic terms, the writer writes and the publisher gets the songs recorded. That's in the most basic terms. It doesn't always work. I pitch songs, and I've had songs recorded that I've pitched myself. And my favorite story is I wrote a song with a friend of mine. Her name was Irene Kelly. She was an independent artist, and she was playing the Opry. And the story is that Alan Jackson was listening to the Opry in his truck on the way home one night, and he heard her playing the song, and he liked it, and he was looking for songs for his next record. And 3 days later, he was in the studio recording that song. We had a history already. He didn't know I was on that song. He called me from the studio after he recorded it. But no publisher involved, no nothing. He heard the song, and he got his people to find out who Irene was, get his hands on the song, and
well, it's funny. I've sent people on my team down wild goose chases about songs when I hear them, and that's why places like the listening room, and that's why I ask you for songwriters to get songs heard, because there are times where I've heard a song being played by the songwriter and it hasn't been recorded by anybody, and they're just performing the stuff that they've written recently, and I go, we need to track that down. I was like, because that's so good, and I think that's a great way for people to hear new music. And just the story with Alan Jackson, who hears it over the radio, and he's like. But I guess Alan Jackson's a little different. He can get anything kind of.
Well, and these days too, a lot of shows at the listening room or others, whether it's live streamed or whether the songwriter themselves now are putting music out up online on Spotify or or Apple Music. So even if it hasn't been recorded, chances are that song is out there somewhere where you can find it
somewhere. You're absolutely right.
Do it.
So I know we've brought her up briefly, but I would love to know about your relationship with Lainey Wilson and what it's like writing with her.
Oh, it was great. We don't have that close a relationship. Back before she was signed to a record deal, I think, but she didn't have anything out. And I was at Sony for a while where she was published, and we just got set up on couple of co-writes. We had a mutual friend. His name was Park Chisholm. He was the other co-writer on the song of mine that she recorded. And but you could just the room lights up when she's in the room, and it was always just the best time sitting there writing. A lot of laughs, and she made anything. The danger was, she made anything sound good. You had to make sure you were writing it well because she could make anything sound good. But no, it was just a great experience. And she recorded, they haven't come out yet. She's recorded a couple of other things in the past that hopefully will see the light of day sometime. But no, I mean, just incredible. And I know other people who are a lot closer to her. And she seems like another person, really generous and really loving and loyal to her friends. And if they have a song, they're going to get a chance to get that song on her album as much as anybody else.
Yeah, and so you have a song that was played on Yellowstone, right?
Yeah. It's a funny story. When she went in to record her first album, I think she recorded our song. It's called New Friends. She recorded it like in the first batch of songs she recorded, and then over time she recorded more and more. Sure. And by the time the album first came out, our song didn't make the album for whatever reason, and that was disappointing. But then a couple of months later, we heard that they were going to use it for an episode of Yellowstone, which was awesome. And the day after the episode aired, it was added to the album, to the extended version of the album. So now when you go to see the album on whatever platform you listen to it on, the song is there. And I have it on vinyl now as part of the album. Was re-released as a double album because there was other songs besides mine. So, it kind of worked out great for me because... when these days when you just have an album cut, it's just monetarily, it's bragging right. It's great. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's wonderful, but you're not making the kind of money you used to from album sales. But with the song being on Yellowstone, we made what they call a sync fee, and then it was on the album.
Yeah,
so we did okay.
You did, you did okay.
We did okay.
I sat down with, now it's been probably over a year, with the Warren brothers, and they're a hoot and a half. But I do know that you also co-wrote, obviously, Highway Don't Care with them. I've heard the story from their side, but I'd love for you to talk about writing that song because that was a huge song for.
It was a great day. It was a great day. We were writing a few. It was me, the Warren brothers, and our buddy and Josh Keir, and we were writing a lot. A lot. Once a month or so. And I can't remember. I think it was Josh's idea. It might have been Brad Warren's idea. So I can't remember, so I apologize to whoever I'm, mistaken about. But we just Brad sat down at the keyboard, which was unusual because Josh usually it was in Josh's office, and he usually sat at the keyboard, but he got up and it was Brett, not Brad, Brett Warren. And he just started playing this melody, and we just started writing it. And then they had the brilliant idea of having this little section of a female singing it. And at the time, I think we were thinking more about Faith Hill singing on it.
I think the Warren brothers said that to me.
And she didn't, for whatever reason, that didn't work out, and kind of thought that was the end of it until Tim had it was Tim's idea to ask Taylor to sing on it. And we were okay with that.
Not so bad.
Yeah. But if you heard the demo, the song is supposedly coming over the radio.
Yes.
So on the demo, in that section, we had a girl come in and sing that part, Caitlin Lynn, and on the demo it sounds like staticky because it's supposed to be on the radio, like a little what they call low tech. They didn't do that, of course, when they had Taylor on. They made it shine through. But no, that was a great day, a great experience writing it.
Did you ever get to watch it be performed live? Did they ever perform it together?
Yeah, they did it on this great. They're on YouTube performances on the ACM Awards and the CMA Awards, and it was great. And he's still performing it a little bit. He uses like the holograph of Taylor behind him.
Okay.
And when he was here in town, I had no idea, but when he played Bridgestone last, he did it.
Yeah.
So that was awesome.
Have you ever gotten to meet Taylor?
Briefly at an NSAI dinner, like we met her briefly.
Okay.
And she is as tall as you think.
You're right. She is a very tall girl.
Yes. Yeah. I met her parents, and we had a great. I tell this story when I play the song out live. It's a true story. It's just my daughter was about 12.
Okay. Oh, so
at the time.
That's prime time for probably loving her.
Well, but the day that I heard that Taylor put her part down I went home to play it to tell her about it, and she just because your parents can never be cool enough for you. So she looked at me and she said, "Why couldn't you get Demi Lovato?"
That's what she said.
Mm-hmm. And so I tell that story every time I play it out. And,
both are.
But even now, I give her grief about it. She turned 21 in May, and I bought her a Taylor Swift T-shirt.
That's good.
But yeah, it's just been amazing. Getting to play that song.
Absolutely. Out of all of the songs that you have written that have actually been recorded and released, what is your favorite lyric that you've written, and from what song?
It's a Tim cut. It was called Friend of a Friend. I wrote it with Josh Keir and Andrew Dorff. Andrew's no longer with us, but there was something really poetic about his lyrics, and it's just my favorite lyric to a song that I've been a part of.
Do you have?
And it's on the same album as Highway Don't Care. It's called Two Lanes of Freedom.
Oh, you had two on the same album.
Actually, there was a third one. Sometimes when they record a song early on, they're so excited about it, but then as the process goes on, things change or whatever. So the song of mine was called Tinted Windows, also written with Josh and Andrew. We had two on there, the three of us, but it didn't make the final cut. But then he released an extended version, and it was on there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What would you say is the greatest compliment you've ever received?
I'd have to think about that for a second. Actually, when Neon Light, a song I had recorded by Blake Shelton, was, at the time, I guess he's still doing, Scott Hendricks produced Blake, but in the past, he was the engineer for Keith, who did Alan's stuff. Who's Alan's producer? Keith Stegall, sorry. And he was engineer for Keith, so he engineered Here in the Real World. So 20 years later, I had a big hit with him on Neon Light, and after our number one party, he sent me the sweetest email, like how happy he was that I was still kicking, still having hits. Still, he goes, the longevity is not that common, and he was really proud of me, and he was really happy for me, and that really touched me that he took the time. People are nice, people are great, people are so complimenting, and 90% of it's sincere. But when to take the time to sit down and write me that email, that really touched me.
What's very interesting you say that is I asked Pete Good what he was most proud of, and he said that he's still here.
Absolutely.
And he's like, I know that sounds cheesy. And I said, no, I don't think so, because you just think about how easy it would be if things aren't going so well, or if you have a lull moment, or even on the other side of it, you have a lot of success and then it's quiet. Yeah. How easy it would be to pack up and head on home.
I don't know. To me, it seemed like that's even a bigger, harder decision. I mean, coming here is a hard enough decision, but then realizing, making that decision, it's over. I'm not doing it. There was a writer, I won't say his name. He had one big hit in the 90s, and then he just couldn't get another song out there, couldn't get another song cut. 5, maybe 6 years passed, and I was at the Bluebird. I don't remember if I was still working there, if I was just hanging out. And he stopped in, and he came in, he said, I'm just coming in to say goodbye, because, everybody was friendly with the waitresses and the bartenders. And, well, what do you mean goodbye? He goes, the town doesn't want my songs. My kids are growing up too far away from their grandparents. We're just going to move back home. And he had his whole family in the car. They had a U-Haul behind it, and he was leaving. And it just hit me like, holy cow, like, what it must have taken to make that decision to say, this isn't going to work. I'm not going to waste any more of my time. Because I've had bad years. I've had years where, multi-years where nothing happened. And I just never even, in my world, because I got married late, but I never even thought about turning around and going back to New Jersey. You ever been in New Jersey? No, but I never even thought about not doing it. Even when before I signed with Smack, after my previous company, went under, my wife, she got a great promotion at work. She's making great money. She looked at me, she goes, do you want to retire? And I'm like, retire from what? From playing the guitar, from writing songs. I'm always going to do that, and as long as I got it in me, I still want to do it. I still think I have hits in me. So I think it's an even harder decision to make to leave than it is to come here.
Well, and also, I read in the Music Row article where they announced your signing with Smack, the last thing that's written there is a quote from you, and it says that you feel like it could be just the start of it, like the beginning.
Once you have somebody believing in you, all of a sudden the energy and there. I mean, I turned 65 this summer, and do you think I feel like 65? I still feel like a dumb 25-year-old,
My dad's 65, and he says 25 too. 25 must be the number that we all feel.
Yeah, I mean, just when somebody believes in you and champions you and wants to take a chance on you, I mean, it's an amazing thing. I
also think it must be hopeful in a sense that it could really just be the beginning, because we are seeing such a shift.
Sure.
Going, back to a way that, like I said, what you're good at. And that's very hopeful to see. And if I say the state of country music and Nashville, give me one word, what's the word you'd say?
The Wild West, because it's open for anything right now. I think anything can happen. You got some great music like Chris Stapleton happening. At the same time, you have still hit music like, Luke Bryan happening, but at the same time, you have artists like Zach Top and some of these other young, just traditional country folks coming up. So I think the genre is like widening, and a lot of stuff is going to work. I think it's going to be more diverse than it's ever been. And I think in the past, it seemed like only one style was working at a time.
You're right, at a time.
And I think now, there's room because of the platform, so many different platforms to hear music. I think, there's every opportunity for someone who does the more pop side of country as there is somebody who does the more traditional side of country and everything in between.
Do you think there is a lack of honesty in the writing room right now in our music?
I mean, I think people try to rewrite songs. They know songs that are great and they love that song, so they want to write one like that song instead of just like, well, why don't we just dig a little bit and see what,
Sure.
Try to come up with sometimes you just come up with a clever phrase and you try to write a song around it. I don't know if it's honesty or it's more like imitation.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and we didn't get into it a ton. It was kind of mentioned in an episode with Parker Welling and how I talked about it was really concerning that I look at the state of country music in the last 5 years, and I mentioned it, and it's up right now. People can go watch, but I said I went on Google just to be interesting and say what's the most influential thing that's happened in country music in 5 years, and it was, according to Google, so that is, it said Luke Combs' Fast Car, and that concerned me.
Interesting.
And not because it's not a good song, not because Luke didn't do an incredible rendition of it. It's because you're telling me in the last 5 years, the most influential thing, according to Google, that's happened in our genre is a cover.
Interesting. Well, it's a cover by an artist who is like so popular right now. They cut a great record on it.
Oh, absolutely.
I always had and I don't take anything away from anything. I think Tracy Chapman is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
And when it won all the awards for Single of the Year, I had no problem with that because it was a great record. But when it won the awards for song, for the writing, I go, didn't it win that already like 20 years ago? I mean, I don't understand how the eligibility for that worked.
Yeah, and that is the part that kind of has worried me about our genre in a sense, is that I would love to see, really good original content being made again that really connects with the people. Because
you are seeing a lot of songs like incorporating old songs and like they're kind of like taking advantage of that familiarity.
Nostalgia.
Yeah,
I got mad. I know, again, I like the song, but like I liked it when Jody Messina did it.
Hez Carolina.
Yeah, it made me a little angry. And this is just my opinion, and we're all allowed to have it. And I was irritated because I thought this was already done, and where's the originality in this? Like, I'm getting a little angry.
And I don't begrudge anybody for doing it if there's a possible way of like commercial success, but at the same time, it's a shame that it has to come to that. I mean, TV commercials, they buy old songs. They want that familiarity. They think that's going to make somebody want to buy their product. I didn't realize we had to do that also in commercial music for the to like want to hear that song or buy that. I don't know, people don't buy albums anymore, but Do you know how I look at it though? And let's see, I want to see if you agree with me, is I don't know if it's necessarily what the audience wants. It's just what's there. It's just what's there. And I kind of associate it with someone who's really hungry, and they're hungry for something, and so they'll almost attach onto anything that seems familiar because it's a lack of anything else. And now they put something in front of them, like I offer 2 burgers, and they're just like, okay, well, that one tastes better, so I guess I'm going to go with that one. And that's where I was worried about the state of our genre, is everything else that's being released just doesn't taste as good, so they just go to what they remember and what they feel comfortable with. So now that I think that more songwriters like you who are being signed to places like Smack and bringing back that flair of which people fell in love with, but writing original content is going to be so helpful, I believe. What is a story for you that you feel like you haven't told yet in a song that you want to tell? Good question. Maybe something more faith-driven, because I've always been more on the commercial side of things. And, it's either, there's all kinds of love songs. I mean, I even had a hit with a song that was about a stalker, and I still introduce it as a love song because it was. But I never really, only lately, I've been writing. It's funny because since I signed with Smack, I've kind of been on a little bit of a jag of writing by myself, which I hadn't really been doing in the last 30 years. And it seemed like the songs I've written by myself kind of lean a little bit more towards the spiritual side of things. And I'm not particularly the most spiritual person you ever meet. But this is stuff that's been coming out that I'm thinking about, you know.
Wow.
My wife says I'm going through the Willie Nelson phase of my career.
No, but I love it because, like I said, what the consumer, I think, is eager for is back to what kind of country music was built on, which was, you know, faith, love, and in your country. And so I think that is a wonderful thing, and I would love to hear more of it because I don't hear as much of it anymore. I do have a strong relationship with my faith, and so it is hard for me to turn on. And I used to hear a more modern day person who did a really good job at that, I thought, was Rascal Flatts.
Sure.
Every time I went to one of their concerts, I didn't miss a tour. I felt like I was almost at worship a lot of the time in their concerts. And I was able to sit down with Jay, and he said that was kind of intentional. Like that was something that they wanted you to feel.
That's great.
And I love that.
That's who they are.
Yeah. And it's it's unapologetically them. And that's really important. Who is an artist that is a dream artist for you, for them to cut one of your songs?
Well, I mean, it's not the most. I'll give you two answers. One, because they're like I love them so much in the country genre. If Emmylou Harris recorded one of my songs, it would be the happiest day of my life. But right now, as commercially, like to have something recorded. Well, I know I'm still the biggest Tim McGraw fan in the world. He's been great to me. I've had about 7 or 8 songs recorded by him, and if I heard today that he recorded another one, I'd be over the moon. Do
you think it would still be financially relevant for him to record a song of yours today as much?
Well, he's one of the, he's still like having hits on radio. My buddy Mark Beeson, who I mentioned earlier, he has his current single out now that's going up in the charts.
Okay. Well, so, then that answers.
He still could have a hit. It's interesting. Everybody, it was here in town, and everybody was very excited about George Strait's new album, which is awesome. But it's going to be interesting to see if he has a radio hit with, and I know radio to a lot of people, on my age under my age, radio doesn't really play into their day-to-day life. But in country music, it still seems that radio still is as big a part of it. Well, not maybe as much as it was, but it's still a big part of, it's still, you want a radio single, you want to get a number one,
absolutely,
on that chart.
And
you want to ring that bell.
Obviously, not to bore everybody who's listening, but when it comes to what's going on with pay for songwriters, it's probably much more better for you to hear it on the radio. Yeah. Streaming is just not there for you guys yet.
Yeah, not yet. And it will be, but not yet. And, and I try not to, I got kids to feed too. So, but I still try to be a little bit, and maybe it's naive of me, but I still try not to bring, money into everything when it comes to the music and stuff. I still, love music for music's sake too,
Yeah.
And just one other thing I want to point out, we were mentioning like songs incorporating older songs, and you mentioned the one that did when Cole Swindell did the one with the Jody Messina song. I thought that was great when it first came out. I thought it was clever, and it was, that's good. I didn't think that everybody's going to jump on the bandwagon, and like now every other song on the radio has to be that. Nashville tends to do that a lot. When something is a success, it comes out, you get a lot of imitators coming up behind it. And I wish it was just a little bit more pushing for, what's the next thing instead of redoing something that somebody else did.
Absolutely. So I'll ask you the same question that I asked Pete. What are you most proud of?
The fact that I've been able to support a family doing what I love. I have one daughter in Swanee at University of the South, which is not cheap.
Yeah.
Another son in college, and we have a great house, and that I've been able to support, family. I'm the first homeowner in my family. My parents were renters. Their parents were renters, and doing it all on, writing songs and music. I'm, real proud of that.
And I want to ask I always ask my guest to ask a question for my next guest. What should I ask my next guest? If I could ask them anything, it could be music related, it could be personal.
I think it's important to know the history of songwriting that came. I've written with some young artists, and I guess, I grew up reading liner notes, so I discovered who wrote songs and who played on things. I love doing it. And I know that's not really that available these days unless you really dig. So, but I think if you're pursuing the, this as a craft, as a career, you should know the people who came before you. Like I've written with some folks who didn't. I mentioned Don Schliss before as one of my heroes, and some Peter Peter McCann was another great older songwriter and stuff. And I've written with people who didn't know who these people are, and they're pursuing songwriting. I think I would ask, do you know who Don Schlitz is? Do you know who Bob McDill is?
Okay.
Because they're the people who came up writing the songs that you probably blew you away first, and maybe you don't realize it or not. I think it's important to know the history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mark Irwin.
you for
I've had a
having me.
lot of good, this has been great. I would love to have you back again sometime.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.